We are very well aware of the broad themes of your campaign by now. So we'd like to hone in on some of the more particular issues to get a sense of how your presidency might evolve. You said that the greed of Wall Street and corporate America is destroying the fabric of our nation. So if we get particular, for example, in corporate America, Apple happens to be celebrating today its 40th.
I'm sorry?
Apple happens to be celebrating today its 40th birthday. It's a company that grew from nothing to 115,000 permanent employees. And I'm wondering, is Apple destroying the fabric of America?
No, Apple is not destroying the fabric of America, but I do wish they'd be manufacturing some of their devices here in the United States rather than in China.
Okay.
And I do wish that they would not be trying to avoid paying their fair share of taxes.
Okay. Well, what would you name, say, 3 American corporate giants that are destroying the national fabric?
J.P. Morgan Chase, and virtually every other major bank in this country. Let me be very clear, all right? I believe that we can and should move to what Pope Francis calls a moral economy. Right now, there are still millions of people in this country who are suffering the results of the greed, recklessness, and illegal behavior on Wall Street. And when you have companies like Goldman Sachs and many other major banks reaching settlements with the United States government, as you're aware of, for many billions of dollars, this is an implicit admission that they have engaged in legal activity.
I understand that. I wanted to draw a distinction, though, because in your speech you said, you mentioned the financial industry, and you focused on corporate America,
yes.
the greed of Wall Street and corporate America.
Yes.
So I wanted to get a sense of corporate America as the agent of American destruction.
General Electric, good example. General Electric was created in this country by American workers, by American consumers. What we have seen over the many years is shutting down of many major plants in this country, sending jobs to low-wage countries, and General Electric doing a very good job avoiding their taxes. In fact, in a given year, they pay nothing in taxes. That's greed. That is greed, and that's selfishness. That is lack of respect for the people of this country.
And so how does that destroy the fabric of America?
I'll tell you how it does.
Yeah.
If you are a corporation and the only damn thing you are concerned about is your profits, let's just give an example of a corporation that's making money in America today, but desiring to move to China or to Mexico because you can make even more money. That is destroying the moral fabric of this country. That is saying that I don't care that the workers here have worked for decades. Doesn't matter to me. The only thing that matters is I can make a little bit more money. That the dollar is all that is almighty. And I think that is the moral fabric. To me, what moral is, I gotta be concerned about you, you gotta be concerned about my wife. That's moral to me. That's what I believe in. And if the only thing that matters to you is making an extra buck, you don't care about my family, I think that's immoral. And I think what corporate America has shown us in the last number of years, what Wall Street has shown us, the only thing that matters is their profits and their money, and to hell with the rest of the people of this country.
Okay, do you weigh in the balance at all the fact that, say, a company that's moving jobs to overseas, that the competitive climate may be such that they feel that they must to compete in the United States?
No, I think firstly you have to appreciate these guys who wrote the rules in the first place. So they wrote the trade agreements. And then, yes, I do understand you can make more profits by paying people in Mexico or China or Vietnam pennies now. I do understand that. But I believe that people have, and by the way, I'm not anti-trade. We live in a global economy. We need trade. But the trade policies that we have allowed to occur, that were written by corporate America, have been disastrous for American workers. So I think we need trade, but I think it should be based on fair trade policies. No, I don't think it is appropriate for trade policies to say that you can move to a country where wages are abysmal, where there are no environmental regulations, where workers can't form unions. That's not the kind of trade agreement that I will support.
So how would you stop that?
I will stop it by renegotiating all of the trade agreements that we have, and by establishing principles that says that what fair trade is about is you are going to take into consideration the wages being paid to workers in other countries and the environmental standards that exist.
Okay. So you're talking NAFTA?
Yes.
You're talking the
PNTO
Pacific?
with
You're
China.
talking all of it?
Yeah.
Right.
These trade, look, these trade agreements, let's be frank, now people may disagree with me.
Yeah.
All right? My understanding, talking to many economists, is NAFTA, TNTR with China, other trade agreements have cost this country millions of jobs. You go to Flint, Michigan today. You know, everyone looks at Flint, Michigan today because they're seeing children being poisoned by the water system.
Mm-hmm.
What people forget is that in the 1960s, Flint, Michigan was one of the wealthiest cities in America. Very prosperous city because you had GM manufacturing plants there. That city is a disaster right now. And that is not just Flint, Michigan. It is cities all over this country have lost their tax base. They've lost their decent paying jobs because of disastrous trade policies.
Okay, go ahead.
Another one of your potential opponents has a very similar sounding answer to or solution to the trade situation, and that's Donald Trump. He also says that, he speaks with much more, blunt language and says, and with few specifics, bad deals, terrible deals. I'll make them good deals. Right. So in that sense, I hear whispers of that same sentiment. How is your take on that issue different than his?
Well, if he thinks they're bad trade deals, I agree with him. They are bad trade deals. But we have some specificity. It's just not going around denouncing bad trade. In other words, I do believe in trade, but it has got to be based on principles that are fair. So if you are in Vietnam, all right, where the minimum wage is 65 cents an hour, we are in Malaysia where many of the workers are indentured servants because their passports are taken away when they come into this country and are working in slave-like conditions. No, I'm not going to have American workers, quote-unquote, competing against you under those conditions. So you have to have standards. And what fair trade means to say that it is fair, it is roughly equivalent to the wages and environmental standards in the United States.
At what point in history, in the recent history of the United States, do you think the balance began to tip against the American worker?
In the early 70s. I think there was late 60s, early 70s. I think Lyndon Johnson's, maybe even earlier than that, victory over Goldwater in 64 got the ruling class of this country very nervous. And I think there became a very organized effort on the part of corporate America and very powerful forces to say, look, we are in trouble, and we're going to have to fight back. And I think what you have seen in a number of ways, trade being one way, attacks on trade unions being another way, to really reestablish and strengthen the power of the few against the many.
Mm-hmm. And do you trace all of that? Do you ascribe, you take those forces, are those the forces in your mind that have led to wage stagnation since then?
I think there has been a very concerted effort to take on trade unions, no question about that. You're seeing that every day, or in the last few years in Wisconsin, what the governor there, Scott Walker, is about. That is a perfect metaphor for what I think corporate America, I'm not going to say all of, but much of corporate America has wanted. To privatize everything that can be privatized, to destroy trade unions, to make it harder for people to get health care, to give tax breaks to the very wealthiest people in this country. I think that has been a very concerted effort.
Now, switching to the financial sector, to Wall Street, speaking broadly, you said that within the first 100 days of your administration, you'd be drawing up, your Treasury Department will be drawing up a too-big-to-fail list.
Yes.
Would you expect that that's essentially the list that already exists under Dodd-Frank, under the Financial Stability Oversight Council?
Yeah, I mean, these are the largest financial institutions in the world.
Okay. And then you further said that you expect to break them up within the first year of your administration.
Yes.
What authority do you have to do that? And how would that work? How would you break up J.P. Morgan Chase?
Well, by the way, the idea of breaking up these banks is not an original idea. It's an idea that some conservatives have also agreed to. You got head of, I think it's the Kansas City Fed, some pretty conservative guys who understands. Let's talk about the merit of the issue. We'll talk about how we get there. Right now, what you have are two factors. We bailed out Wall Street because the banks were too big to fail, correct? Turns out that 3 out of the 4 largest banks are bigger today than they were when we bailed them out when they were too big to fail. That's number one. Number two, If you look at the 6 largest financial institutions in this country, they have assets somewhere around $10 trillion. That is equivalent to 58% of the GDP of America. They issue 2/3 of the credit cards in this country and about 1/3 of the mortgages. That is a lot of power. And I think if somebody like a Teddy Roosevelt were alive today, he would look at there, forgetting even the risk element, the bailout element, and just look at the kind of financial power that these guys have, would say that that is too much power.
Okay, well, let's assume that you're correct on that point. How do you go about doing it?
How you go about doing it is having legislation passed or giving the authority to the Secretary of Treasury to determine, under Dodd-Frank, that these banks are a danger to the economy under the problem of too big.
But do you think that the Fed now has that authority?
I don't know if the Fed has it, but I think the administration can have it.
How? I mean, how does a president turn to J.P. Morgan Chase or have the Treasury turn to any of those banks and say, now you must do X,
You got
Y, and
authority-
Z?
Well, you do have authority under the Dodd-Frank legislation to do that.
You
to make
do,
that
just
determination.
by Federal Reserve fiat?
Yeah.
You do?
Yeah,
Okay.
I believe you do.
So if you look forward a year, maybe 2 years, right now you have J.P. Morgan has 241,000 employees, about 20,000 of them in New York, $192 billion in net assets. What happens? What do you foresee? What is J.P. Morgan in
Well,
year 2?
What I foresee is a stronger national economy, in fact, a stronger economy in New York State as well. What I foresee is a financial system which actually makes affordable loans to small and medium-sized businesses, does not live as an island unto themselves, concerned about their own profits, and in fact creating incredibly complicated financial tools which have led us into the worst economic recession in the modern history of the United States.
I get that point. I'm just looking at the method because when actions have reactions, right?
Yes.
And there are pluses and minuses. So if you push here, you may get an unintended consequence that you don't understand. So what I'm asking is, how can we understand, if you look at J.P. Morgan just as an example, or you could do Citibank or Bank of America, what would it be? What would that institution be? Would there be a consumer bank? Where would the investing go?
That is not, I'm not running J.P. Morgan Chase.
No, but you'd be
Citibank.
breaking it up.
That's right, and that is their decision as to what they want to do and how they want to reconfigure themselves. It's not my decision. All I am saying is that I do not want to see this country be in a position where it was in 2008, where we have to bail them out.
Okay.
And in addition, I oppose that kind of concentration of ownership. in
Okay, now
town.
I'm a
But
little...
you're asking a question, which is a fair question. But let me just take your question and take it to another issue.
Go ahead.
All right? It would be fair for you to say, well, Bernie, you got on there that you are strongly concerned about climate change and that we have to transform our energy system away from fossil fuel. What happens to the people in the fossil fuel industry? That's a fair question. But the other part of that is if we do not address that issue, the planet we're going to leave your kids and your grandchildren may not be a particularly healthy or habitable. So I can't say, if you're saying that we're going to break up the banks, will it have a negative consequence on some people? I suspect that it will. Will it have a positive impact on the economy in general? Yes, I would not.
Well, it does depend on how you do it, I believe. And I'm a little bit confused because just a few minutes ago you said you thought the president, you as president, would have authority to order the
No, I
banks.
did not say we would order. I did not say that we would
Okay,
order.
I'm sorry, I
The
didn't-
president is not a dictator.
Okay, so you would then leave it to J.P. Morgan Chase or the others to figure out how to break it themselves up? I'm not.
What you determine is that if a bank is too big to fail, it is
Right.
too big to exist. And then you have the Secretary of Treasury and some people who know a lot about this making that determination. And if the determination is that Goldman Sachs or J.P. Morgan Chase is too big to fail, yes, they will be broken up.
Okay. You saw, I guess, what happened with Metropolitan Life. There was an attempt to bring them under the financial regulatory scheme, and the court said no. I mean, what is that presage for your program?
It's something I have not studied, honestly, the legal implications of it.
Okay. Staying with Wall Street, you've pointed out, and I'll quote, that not one major Wall Street executive has been prosecuted for causing the near collapse of our entire economy.
That's right.
Why was that? Why did that happen? Why was there no prosecutions?
I would
Were there no
suspect that
prosecutions?
the answer that some would give you is that what they did was horrific and greedy and had a huge impact on our economy, that some suggested that they were not legal, that those activities were not illegal. I
Okay.
disagree, and I think an aggressive attorney general would have found illegal activity.
So do you think that President Obama's Justice Department essentially was either in the tank
No, I wouldn't
or
say
not
that at
as
the
a...
time. I would, Sanders' administration would have a much more aggressive attorney general looking at all of the legal implications. All I can
Okay.
tell you is that if you have Goldman Sachs paying a settlement fee of $5 billion, other banks paying a larger fee,
Right.
I think most Americans think, well, why do they pay $5 billion? Not because they're a heck of a nice guys and want to pay $5 billion. Something was wrong there. And if something was wrong, I think there were legal activities.
Okay, but do you have a sense that there is a particular statute or statutes that a prosecutor could have or should have invoked
I
to
suspect
bring
that there are,
indictments?
Yes.
You believe that,
Yeah.
but do you know?
I believe that is the case, though I have it in front of me now. the
Yeah,
legal
I know,
statutes.
but
No, I
it's-
don't.
I'm-
But if I would, yeah, that's what I believe, yes. When a company pays a $5 billion fine for doing something that's illegal, yeah, I think we can bring charges
Okay.
against the executives.
I'm only pressing because you've made it such a
Look, let me
essential
be
part of
clear.
your campaign.
That's right.
And
Let
I
me-
wanted
let-
to know what the mechanism
Let
would be
me
to
be,
accomplish
let me
it.
be very clear about this.
Yep.
All right? Let me repeat what I have said. Maybe I got to quote that. I do believe that to a significant degree, the business model of Wall Street is fraud. And you asked me, you started this discussion off appropriately enough about when I talk about morality. When I
Right.
talk about, that's what I think. I think when you have the most powerful financial institutions in this country, whose assets are equivalent to 58% of the GDP of this country, who day after day engage in fraudulent activity, that sets a tone. That sets a tone for some 10-year-old kid in this country who says, look, these people are getting away from it. They're lying, they're cheating. Why can't I do that?
What
That
kind
cre-
of fraudulent activity are you referring to when you say that?
What kind of fraudulent
You
activity?
say they're...
Fraudulent activity that brought this country into the worst economic decline in its history by selling packages of fraudulent, worthless subprime mortgages. How's that for a start? You know, selling products to people who you knew could not repay them, lying to people without allowing them to know that in a year their interest rates would be off the charts. They would not repay that. Bundling these things, putting them into packages with good mortgages. That's fraudulent activity.
You say also that the big financial institutions and the wealthy have rigged the game
Yeah.
against regular Americans. And you've also criticized Hillary Clinton for saying, quote, "We just need to impose a few more fees and regulations on the finance industry." You've also pointed out her financial ties, if
Yes.
you will, to Wall Street.
Yep.
So, given all of that, is Secretary Clinton trustworthy on this issue?
Let me get back to your first point about a rigged economy, which is absolutely what I have said. Thank you. You got my quotes right. A rigged economy is about an economy, for example, where the wealthiest family in this country, the Walton family of Walmart, pays its workers wages that are so low that the middle class has to pay more in taxes to provide food stamps and Medicaid for Walmart employees. A rigged economy is when you have corporations making billions of dollars a year in taxes, billions of dollars a year in profit, and not paying a nickel in taxes. A rigged economy is where you have companies able to shut down as a result of trade agreements that they have written and move abroad and pay people pennies an hour. That is a rigged economy. A rigged economy is when, in the wealthiest country in the history of the world, the top 1/10 of 1% now owns almost as much wealth as the bottom 90%. If that's not a rigged economy, I don't know what a rigged economy is. Now, Hillary Clinton, I'll let the American, I have tried to run a campaign, which is an issue-oriented campaign, where I've expressed my strong disagreement with Secretary Clinton on trade issues. She has supported virtually all of these trade agreements. On how we raise money, I don't have a super PAC. She has several super PACs which have
Right.
raised a lot of money. She has given speeches to Wall Street. I have not attacked her personally. I will let the American people make a determination about her trustworthiness. That is not an area that I've got.
Okay, well, let's take it out of the character question then. The if you look at the facts, a rigged economy, Hillary Clinton saying that she would impose some fees and extra costs, and you finding that insufficient. And you also saying that she has been, taking money, including personal funds, from financial industry interests. Were she to be elected, do you think that the American people could have the expectation or the trust that she would be aggressive enough against the banks and financial institutions?
It's a very fair question. I think the answer is they would probably have the expectation she would not be aggressive enough. Look, I will not shock anybody in this room in suggesting what everybody in America knows, that Hillary Clinton is the candidate of the Democratic establishment. All right, you don't get $15 million from Wall Street by accident. She is a establishment candidate. To my point of view, in terms of her issues and views, far, far preferable to any of the Republican candidates. But I think what she has basically said is not to expect bold change from her. She talks about incremental change. I think that's a fair statement, is it not? All right, I believe that in the midst of the kinds of crises that we face, with the disappearing middle class, massive levels of income and wealth inequality, the only major country on earth not to guarantee health care to all people, only major country not to provide paid family and medical leave, it is time to get beyond establishment politics. So to put your question in maybe a simpler way, is she a candidate of the establishment? The answer is, of course she is. That does not make her an evil person. I'm not judging her.
I wasn't suggesting that.
No, I know that. But that's all, yeah.
With that and with a couple of those points in mind, there's a lot of speculation that if she were to win the nomination, would your followers and your supporters vote for her, or would their absence in the voting in November help whomever the Republican nominee is, whether it's Trump or Cruz? With that in mind, and this might be putting the cart ahead of the horse a little bit, would you ever consider running as her vice president?
Well, I think you have put the cart ahead of the horse on that one. We are in this race to win. We think we got a shot to win, and that's what we're focusing on right now. There are millions of people, I'm very grateful, millions of people are supporting me. How they will vote, I don't know.
But are you concerned, not to interrupt you, about that the specter of there not being enough support rallying around her from your
What
camp?
I am concerned about, and what I think would be a disaster for the United States of America, is to see a Donald Trump or some right-wing Republican become president of the United States. I will do everything I can to prevent that from happening.
Okay. Let me
Senator, I wanted to ask you about, because you got this enormous support from young people, as President Obama did in 2008 and in 2012, and you're promising a political revolution. But if nothing changes in the Senate and in the House of Representatives, how are you going to be able to get anything done? I mean, the real issue to me seems to be what happens in the Senate and what happens in the House of Representatives.
Two things. We are talking about a political revolution, and we are already delivering on a political revolution well before Election Day. What do I mean by that? What I mean is this country, and what I say in every speech that I give, no president, not me, anybody else, can do it alone. We need to revitalize American democracy, get people engaged in the political process in a way that we have not seen for a very, very, very long time. And the reason I say that, getting back to the question that's right here, is in my view, the powers that be in this country, Wall Street, large campaign contributors, corporate America, are so powerful, no president alone could do it. So what we are seeing already in this campaign is we have received over 6 million individual campaign contributions. That's a political revolution. You know that? That's unprecedented, I believe, at this point in the campaign in history. We are seeing, and when you talk about young people, please do not think that these are 23-year-olds or younger. In virtually every primary and caucus process, we have won the votes of people 45 years of age or younger. I mean, not just kids. And we're seeing, I think, a revitalization of American democracy. I never believed that we could have voter turnouts higher than Obama did in 2008, because I thought his 2008 campaign was one of the great campaigns in American history. And yet, in at least 5 states, the voter turnout in this campaign so far has been higher. So we are striking a nerve. People want to get involved in the political process, and I'm very proud of that. Now, to answer your question, you can't look at politics as a zero-sum game and say, okay, first of all, if I win, it will almost by definition mean that there will be a very large voter turnout. That's what I believe. If there is a very large voter turnout, I think the odds are pretty strong Democrats will regain control of the Senate, do better in the House. Can they win the House? I don't know, but they will do better. But more importantly, if I win, it will mean that millions of people now want to be involved in the political process in a way that has not previously existed. Every item that I am talking about on my agenda is, I believe, supported by the majority of the people in this country. My major job is to mobilize the American people to demand that Congress listen to them and their needs rather than just the big money interest. That's how you make change take place. For example, as you know, I've talked about the need to make public colleges and universities tuition-free. Do I believe we can deliver on that? Absolutely. Because I believe that millions of young people and their parents understand that that's what we should be doing right now. And I think if Republicans or some Democrats want to vote against it, they will pay a very heavy political price.
Let me, does anyone else have a question on the...
I actually wanted to follow up on something you just said. I have heard very, very little in this campaign about education. What do you think about that, considering what's going on in this country, but also, very specifically, there's a trend in this country of wealthy suburbs being better funded in education than urban districts.
Yes.
In this state, there's even a lawsuit where the plaintiffs prevailed, but nothing changed. What would a Sanders
That was
administration?
the same thing in South Carolina, by the way.
Yeah, no, there's a few of them,
Yeah.
but what would or could a Sanders administration do about
You can
this?
do a lot. Number one, your point is absolutely right, and I think there has not been enough discussion. I've kind of focused on at the university level, dealing about public colleges, universities being tuition-free, lowering student debt. But your point is a very important point. There is a major effort for a start to privatize public education in America, which I think is a disastrous idea. I think we have got to adequately fund education. I think in the broader sense, what we have got to do is make the American people understand how important education is to our quality of life and to our economy. So what does that mean? It means that we have to start off at the lowest league. Right now, every psychologist in the world will tell you that 0 through 4 are the most important years of a human being's life. All right? No debate. Our child care pre-K system is dysfunctional. You got teachers out there, well, instructors or somebody, I don't know what the title is, who make less than McDonald's workers. They have no benefits. They're making $10 an hour. These are the people we are entrusting with the youngest kids in America. That's insane.
Okay, well, let me. I'd like to switch topics here
Well, let me just say that I think education is an enormously important topic.
No question.
Arthur, can I ask one question?
Yes, you may, of course.
Having lived in Vermont for quite a while myself, and a fellow Vermonter,
Where'd you live?
well, I have a place in Morristown,
Yeah, sure.
but when you were mayor of Vermont,
Burlington.
Burlington, I'm sorry, I guess you're mayor of Vermont too. When you were mayor of Burlington and you revitalized the city the way it is today, and you had a lot of opposition when you became mayor. But one of the ways you were able to succeed in making all the changes in a very pragmatic way is that you had a lot of grassroots organizations.
That's right.
That were able to create a lot of influence with local government.
Yes.
Is that possible to be able to do that at the federal
Absolutely.
level?
Thank you. Thank you for raising that issue. And you were
Is it possible to do that at the federal level?
Absolutely. And that's what I was just talking in response to your question. Okay. You know, people say to me, well, Bernie, how are you going to bring about change? You got Mitch McConnell or, Paul Ryan or whoever it is. Are they going to do the things you want? And the answer is no. But the way change happened in Burlington is we had tremendous opposition. By the way, I ran as an independent. It was mostly Democrats who opposed me at that point. We rallied the people in the city, the grassroots organizations. A year later, we won more seats on the city council to give us veto power. And mostly the Democrats understood that the sentiment had changed. They started working with me. That's what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is millions of people. For example, let me give you just a concrete example of that. 2 examples. Right now, I gather yesterday it was, correct me if I'm wrong, the governor and legislature reached an agreement here for a $15 an hour minimum wage, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now, if you and I were sitting here 5 years ago and I said, I think in 2016 there'll be a $15 an hour agreement, you would have said I was crazy, correct?
I'm not sure.
Well, many people would have. Many people would have. But what happened? What happened is a grassroots movement developed. Remember, the national minimum wage, $7.25 an hour. It's a big
Yeah,
jump.
right, it
Okay.
is.
It happened because people stood up and fought back. All right? In the Congress right now, massive effort on the part of Republicans to cut Social Security and some Democrats. I formed a caucus called the Defending Social Security Caucus. They haven't cut Social Security. We rallied senior citizens. So to answer your question, that is exactly the model I am talking about.
Okay, well, now let me...
You doubled voter turnout. I think it's
Okay.
important to.
That's my
Well,
slogan.
good, thank you. So I want to focus you on some international issues, starting with Israel. While speaking forcefully of Israel's need for security, you said that peace will require an end to attacks of all kinds and recognition of Israel's right to exist. Just to be clear, does that mean recognition of Israel's right to exist as a Jewish state?
Of course, I mean, it's the status quo.
Excuse me?
Status quo, absolutely.
Okay. You've called not just for halting construction of so-called settlements, but I believe you've also, on the West Bank, but you've also called for pulling back settlements, just as Israel did in Gaza. Describe the pullback that you have in mind.
Well, that's the Israeli government's plan. But I think that right now, I'm not going to run the Israeli government. I have enough problems trying to be a United States Senator and maybe President of the United States.
No, but if you are president, you will, I assume, become deeply enmeshed in
I assume
attempting
that-
the peace process.
I assume that's
And where you
absolutely
start on the negotiations is important.
Here's the main point that I want to make. I lived in Israel. I have family in Israel. I believe 100% not only in Israel's right to exist, but right to exist in peace and security without having to face terrorist attacks. But from the United States' point of view, I think long-term, we cannot ignore the reality that you have large numbers of Palestinians who are suffering now, poverty rate off the charts, unemployment off the charts, Gaza remaining a destroyed area. And I think that for long-term peace in that region, and God knows nobody has been successful in that in 60 years, but there are good people on both sides, and Israel cannot just simply expand when it wants to expand with new settlements. So I think the United States has got to help work with the Palestinian people as well. I think that is the path toward peace.
I was talking about something different, though. Expanding settlements is one thing. Coming into office as a president who said as a baseline that you want Israel to pull back settlements, that changes the dynamic in the negotiations.
Well,
and
I
I'm
think-
wondering how far and what you want Israel to do in terms of pulling back.
Well, again, you're asking me a very fair question, and if I had some paper in front of me, I would give you a better answer. But I think if the expansion was illegal, moving into territory that was not their territory, I think withdrawal from those territories is appropriate.
And who makes the call about illegality in your mind?
Well, I think it's based on previous treaties and ideas. I happen to think that those expansions were illegal.
Okay, so if we were to find Israeli settlements, so-called settlements, in places that that has been designated to be illegal, you would expect Israel to be pulling them back.
Israel will make their own decisions. They are a government and an independent nation. But to the degree that they want us to have a positive relationship, I think they're going to have to improve their relationship with the Palestinian
Okay,
people.
but I'm just talking about, you'll be getting involved in the negotiations, and this would be setting a benchmark for the negotiations, that you would enter the talks, if you do, having conveyed to both parties, including the Palestinians, that there's a condition here that you want Israel to remove what you described as illegal settlements. That's going to be the baseline now. If
Well,
you're,
there's going
if
to be a
you're
lot of
the
things on the baselines. There are going to be demands being made of the Palestinian folks as well.
okay.
When you sit down and negotiate,
And what are those
obviously,
demands?
well, for a start, the absolute condemnation of all terrorist attacks. the idea that in Gaza there were buildings being used to construct missiles and bombs and tunnels, that is not where foreign aid should go. Foreign aid should go to housing and schools, not the development of bombs and missiles.
Okay. Now, you have obviously condemned Hamas for indiscriminate rocket attacks and the construction of the military tunnels. But you've also criticized Israel for what you described as a disproportionate
Yes.
response. And I'm going to look at 2014, which was the latest, conflict. What should Israel have done instead?
You're asking me now to make not only decisions for the Israeli government, but for the Israeli military, and I don't quite think I'm qualified to make decisions. But I think it is fair to say that the level of attacks against civilian areas, and I do know that the Palestinians, some of them were using civilian areas to launch missiles, makes it
Right.
very difficult.
Right.
But I think most international observers would say that the attacks against Gaza were indiscriminate, and that a lot of innocent people were killed who should not have been killed. Look, we are living, for better or worse, in a world of high technology, where there are drones out there that could, take your nose off, right? I mean,
Right.
and Israel has that technology. And I think there's a general belief that with that technology, it could have been more discriminate
Okay.
in terms of taking out weapons that were threatening them.
Well, do you support the Palestinian leadership's attempt to use the International Criminal Court to litigate some of these issues, to establish that, in their view, Israel had committed essentially war crimes?
No.
Why not?
Why not?
Why not? Why?
Look, why not? Why don't I support a million things in the world? I'm just telling you that I happen to believe. Anybody help me out here, because I don't remember the figures, but my recollection is over 10,000 innocent people were killed in Gaza. Does that sound right?
I think it's probably high, but
All
that's, we can look at that.
I don't have it in my number, but I
Yeah.
think it's over 10,000. My understanding is that a whole lot of apartment houses were leveled. Hospitals, I think, were bombed. So, yeah, I do believe, and I don't think I'm alone in believing that Israel's force was more indiscriminate than it should have been.
Okay, we will check the facts. I don't want to venture a number that I'm not sure on, but we will check those facts. Now, talk about Hamas. What is it? Is it a terrorist organization?
Yes,
Okay, Hezbollah too?
yes.
Okay. Now, switching more broadly to the Middle East and some of the other troubled areas with ISIS, the Obama administration has been using this drone program, right? What are your thoughts on that? They're using.
Well, first thought, let me just talk about the Middle East and talk about one of the differences that exists between Secretary Clinton and myself. I think we can argue reasonably that the most important and significant and far-reaching debate that we've had on foreign policy in this country in recent years was over the war in Iraq. Not only did I vote against the war in Iraq, not only did I lead the opposition to the war, help lead the opposition to the war in Iraq. If you look at the statements that I made on the floor of the House in 2002, sadly to say, much of what I feared would happen actually has happened. Okay, Hillary Clinton's views were very different. She supported the war in Iraq. Now, in terms of ISIS, this is a barbaric organization that obviously has got to be destroyed, but it must and can be destroyed without the United States getting involved in perpetual warfare in the Middle East, something that I fear very, very much. So my view is that, very similar to what King Abdullah of Jordan said, that essentially the war against ISIS is a war over the soul of Islam, that the war must be won by Muslim troops on the ground with the support of the United States and other major powers. That is what I believe. And I think President Obama, who has been criticized roundly by Republicans and others, of being quote unquote too soft, too weak, whatever. In fact, that strategy is, under very difficult circumstances, actually beginning to prove to be a success. ISIS has lost about 40% of the territory it controlled in Iraq. We've seen the Iraqi army, maybe, God willing, show some fighting spirit, being able to take back Ramadi. So we're seeing some success.
Okay, while we were sitting here, I double-checked the facts. It's the miracle of the iPhone, and
Yes.
my recollection was correct. It was about 2,300, I believe, killed and 10,000 wounded. Okay. President Obama has taken the authority for drone attacks away from the CIA and given it to the U.S. military. Some say that that has caused difficulties in zeroing in on terrorists or ISIS leaders. Do you believe that he's got the right policy there?
I don't know the answer to that. What I do know is that drones are a modern weapon. When used effectively, when taking out ISIS or terrorist leaders, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
When bombing wedding parties of innocent people and killing dozens of them, that is, needless to say, not effective and enormously counterproductive. So whatever the mechanism, whoever is control of that policy, it has to be refined so that we are killing the people we want to kill and not innocent collateral damage.
Okay. American Special Forces recently killed a top ISIS commander. After they'd hoped to capture him, they felt, from what the news reports were, that they had no choice at that. What would you do with a captured ISIS commander?
Imprison them and
Where?
try to get as much information out of them. If the question leads us to Guantanamo,
Well, I know it's wholly separate and apart from Guantanamo. It could be there, it could be anywhere. What would, where would a President Sanders imprison, interrogate? I don't know. What would you do?
actually I haven't thought about it a whole lot. I suppose somewhere near the locale where that person was captured, or the best location where that individual will be safely secured and in a way that we can get information out of him.
Would it be in the United States?
Would it be in the United States?
Yeah,
It could
I
be,
mean,
you know.
some of these places are lawless lands. You've got Libya,
Yeah.
you've got Yemen, you know, you have
If
special
the
forces.
question is, do I believe that terrorists can be safely imprisoned in the United States? The answer is yes.
Yeah, okay.
I have
Go ahead.
just a couple of New York quick questions. Will there be a New York debate?
Well, that's a good question. If I have anything to say about it, there would. You know, it's hard for me to imagine that somebody who was a United States Senator here for 8 years would not be willing to debate issues of importance to New York and issues of importance to the United States of America. So the answer is we have asked for that debate. I think the staffs are talking. My understanding is that the Clinton people are kind of dragging their feet. So the answer is I would love to see a debate, yes.
I know you got to go in a second. When was the last time you rode the subway? Are you going to campaign on the subway?
Actually, we rode the subway, Mike, when we were here about a year ago, so.
Um,
I know how to ride the subways.
Have you
I've
seen-
been on them once or twice.
Do you
Have you seen
really?
Ham-
Do
have
you
you seen
really?
Hamilton?
Do you really? How do you ride the subway today?
What do you mean, how do you ride the
How do
subway?
you get on the subway
You got a
today?
token and you get in?
Wrong.
You change the rules. You jump over the turnstile.
Well,
We would like our photographer to be there when you jump over the.
Like anybody to be there when I jump over.
Coming back,
They only leave the ground.
returning another New York issue, we're just a few blocks away from the World Trade Center.
Yep.
Down in Guantanamo, there's Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the architect.
Yep.
I believe you're against the death penalty.
Yep.
Are you against the death penalty for him?
Yep.
You are. Why is that?
Because I think the death penalty does not prove to be effective in stopping the crimes that we want to see stopping. And second of all, at a time when virtually every major country on earth has eliminated the death penalty for right reasons. In a world of as much violence as currently exists, I don't believe our government should be involved in killing.
But you place Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, if you do, I'm asking, in the same moral basket as the street criminals
No.
under that.
I place him as a murderous, disgusting terrorist, and we have seen in this country terrible crimes being, I don't have to explain to anybody in this room, people
Right.
coming up the sheet. with automatic weapons and killing children in Sandy Hook.
Yep.
They're disgusting crimes, but I happen to believe that in the long run, from a moral perspective and from an effectiveness perspective, death penalty does not work.
But you would have no hesitation about killing him if a drone found him on a battlefield.
Well, unfortunately, we live in a, that's right, there's a difference. If I have you captured and I kill you, it's different than killing you on a battlefield. I think that is a very different moral. If you're asking me, am I a pacifist? Don't believe in killing people in war, that's not my position.
So
I do oppose death penalty.
speaking of New York, and issues important to New York, and speaking of death, last year after the Oregon Community College shootings, you promised a comprehensive gun control agenda. When are we going to see that, and what can you tell us?
Well,
What
I've
will
talked about it, you have seen it, and what the agenda is very similar to where President Obama is. President Obama said in an Oregon speech, with a great deal of emotion, that he thought this was an issue that's never going to be permanently solved. Nobody can guarantee that some lunatic is not going to take out a gun today and kill people. But that we have to do the best that we can to prevent those type of killings. And what we do, in my view, is significantly strengthen and expand the instant background check. What we do is do away with the gun show loophole, where people now are buying guns from unlicensed dealers. What we do is do away with the straw man provision, where you can buy a gun legally and then sell it to somebody who's a criminal. I think what we also do is significantly expand mental health capabilities to try to address the fact that we have thousands of people walking this country today who are suicidal and homicidal. So I support pretty much the president's agenda.
Just to be clear, the press release your campaign put out the day that announcement of the forthcoming comprehensive plan, that you made that announcement, those were the 4 points you made then, and so have you moved
Well, I
any
don't know that anyone
further
has
beyond
made,
that?
made, I mean, that's what I think, that's the president's position, that's my position.
There's a case currently waiting to be ruled on in Connecticut. The victims of the Sandy Hook massacre are looking to have the right to sue for damages the manufacturers of the weapons. Do you think that is something that should be expanded?
Do I think
The right-
victims
yeah.
of a crime with a gun should be able to sue the manufacturer? That's your question?
Correct.
No, I don't.
Now, let me ask, I know we're short on time, two quick questions. Your website talks...
Let me just, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
in the same sense that if you're a gun dealer and you sell me a gun, and I go out and I kill him, do I think his or him, or all right, do I think that that gun dealer should be sued for selling me a legal product that he misused? But I do believe that gun manufacturers and gun dealers should be able to be sued when they should know that guns are going into the hands of wrong people. So somebody walks in and says, I'd like 10,000 rounds of ammunition, you know? Well, you might be suspicious about that. So I think there are grounds for those suits, but not if you sell me a legal product. What you're really saying.
Do you think that the discussion and debate about what defines a legal product, what should be a legal product, hence AR-15s, these automatic military-style weapons, which is the grounds of this suit at the moment, is that this should have never been in the hands of the public to begin with?
You're looking at a guy, so we should, let's talk about guns for 1 second to set the record straight, because there have been some unnamed candidates who have misrepresented my views. You're looking at a guy who has a D minus voting record from the NRA. Not exactly a lobbyist for the NRA, not exactly supporting them. Number two, interesting that you raised that question. I don't know if you remember this, if you were in Vermont in 1988. 3 people were running for the United States Congress. We have 1 seat in Vermont. 2 of them supported assault weapons. One candidate, Bernie Sanders, said in 1988, no, I do not support the sale or distribution of assault weapons in this country. I lost that election by 3 points, came in second. That may have been the reason why I was opposed by all of the gun people. Okay? So to answer your question, I do not believe, I didn't believe then, and I don't believe now, that those guns should be sold in America. They're designed for killing people.
So do you think then, with that in mind, that the merits of the current case are baseless?
I think it's not baseless, I wouldn't use that word, but it's a back the way. If you're questioning me, will I vote to ban assault weapons in the United States Senate? Yeah, I will.
Two quick questions. Two quick questions.
One more, yeah.
2 quick questions. One is, your website talks about physical violence perpetrated by the state against African Americans.
Yeah,
Right? It also says, quote, we need new rules on the allowable use of force,
yeah.
such as,
such as to do what many other countries are doing. Look, you got somebody who's clearly mentally ill outside, right?
Right.
Ranting and raving, and maybe they have a knife in their hands.
Right.
Are there ways to deal with that issue other than shooting that person? We have seen instances in my own state, all over this country, where the way that was dealt with by killing that person. There are ways to deal with that. So I think what I am suggesting here, very forcefully, is that we have got to train police officers to use lethal force as a last resort, not a first resort.
Okay, last question. If you are elected, alums of James Madison High School will be atop all three branches of the United States government. Congress, the Senate, the presidency, and the Supreme Court.
Well, not quite this, well. yeah,
Ruth
not
Bader
quite this-
Ginsburg.
Well, she's
you know?
there, I know.
Yeah,
she's-
no, it's, so
She's like, yeah.
what happened? What has happened to education in America that James Madison High School is not that type of production line
That's a great
anymore?
question. And in all due respect, you went to Midwood?
No, I live in Midwood.
Oh, you
Near
live in-
Midwood High
all
School,
right,
yeah.
All right, Midwood was a pretty good school as well.
My daughter's at Bronx Science.
Okay. All right, first thought, we still have some great schools, and let's not dismiss that. On the other hand, we have schools that everybody knows are dropout factories that are terrible. The answer to the question, I think, has to do with devaluing the role of education in our society. I was in Wisconsin just the other day talking to teachers, and they said, if you can believe this, that young people do not want to become teachers anymore, because especially in that state, teachers in public education have been so vilified. Can you imagine, right, young people not wanting to do the enormously important job of teaching? So we've got to change that culture. Teaching, education is of the highest importance in this country. Teachers deserve to be well paid, well respected. You know, when I grew up in that community, this was a community of immigrants, largely immigrants, who understood and valued education. We had great teachers and we had great schools. I think we can do that again.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.